Thank you very much and good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here as part of the conference track on smart city governance and urban planning. My colleague Alexandra and me are going to talk about data governance today, and the lecture will shed light on the question, how can conflicting interests in the collection and processing of data be reconciled to enable data-driven urban transformation for the common good? It's a pretty long title, but I hope it will basically outline what we try to, the point that we try to make here, because as we will argue, this question, of course, is also pretty key for the development and implementation of digital twins. The results we will present today stem from the research project Data in Smart City Governance using the example of air quality management. And as we are a scientific research project with a strong practical focus, the results are firstly anchored in the research process, and they're also secondly validated by the research process. And we will get to that in detail in the presentation we will give. So firstly, to begin with, we will show, we will firstly present the problem and our understanding of the problem that we try to address, then map that to our approach to actually solve the problem, and then show the results. That's what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes. The consortium of the research project consists of the, as mentioned, the Alexander von Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society in Berlin, together with the Center for the Competence of Water in Berlin. And also part of the team is Jochen Rabe and Max von Grafenstein, who are also Berlin-based researchers who initially drafted the project. And over the course of time, we also had Arup Deutschland as the technical partner with whom we developed a prototype for air quality management, and Siemens as an associate technical partner that we talk about in the early beginning of the project. And as some other projects in the room, this project is funded by the governing mayor of Berlin as part of the MPSC project, which itself gets the funds from the Federal Ministry of Housing. So what's the topic of our research? The premise, in short, is that technology itself and technology and data is not the problem of data-driven transformation, but instead that the data and technology that is there cannot be easily used by administrations and the other stakeholders in the smart city sector. This is also backed by other research in the field. Maybe we can get to that in the discussion, but the reason for that, or the reason why we think that this is true and took it as a premise of our research project, is that conflicts of interests arise in the data collection and processing over the course of the data lifecycle, and this is why data cannot be used. The question we ask for our project is then, of course, what is the best way to reconcile these conflicts of interest with the focus on smart cities so that the data can actually be used in the end. The objective of the whole project is to develop a generalized data governance model to solve this question of how all actors in a smart city, which means municipality, administration, politicians, enterprises, corporates, small and medium-sized enterprises, and the citizens can work together on data with a focus that is oriented towards the common good. As our project title already indicates, we also have a use case, which is air quality management. But this is the very important thing of that is that it's a sandbox example, so we're not an environmental research project. It also has close interconnections to the SDGs, especially SDG 13, of course, but we're no experts on air, although we learned a lot over the last 3 years, but it's a complex topic. But we took it as a sandbox to address the question and the premises that lie behind the question of data governance. However, the data governance model that we develop in the project is not limited neither to the city of Berlin nor to the use case of air quality management, but instead is generalized and transferred to other municipalities and problems and challenges of urban transformation. So the key question. We started this project initially on the observation that data-driven urban transformation is hampered by a series of legal uncertainties and the lack of a suitable organizational framework for the development and management of data-driven services. And again, technology and data in themselves are not the problem, but instead the legal uncertainties and the lack of the organizational frameworks. As mentioned, stakeholders have different interests in data with regard to specific use case and in a specific context, and the consequence, these conflicts of interest arise. To go more into detail, what do we mean with these conflicts of interests? the subjective perceptions of value and risk of data processing, they differ highly across the actors. So the risks are very specific from the outset. Just think of the regulatory compliance or also the violation of business secrets when it comes to enterprises. And the potential benefit of data processing can only be assessed in the end. So when you have a specific use case and you can assess the potential benefit and weigh that with the risks, because this is this balance is important, because only when the potential benefits outweigh the risks, then data sharing and processing becomes worthwhile for the stakeholders. And if that's not the case, then simply it won't happen and nobody can benefit from the data that is there, but the risks still outweigh the benefits. And this is what we call the so-called risk-value dilemma, and this needs to be reconciled. And yeah, so the question is, how can this be reconciled? The short answer on that is that the reconciliation of these conflicts of interest requires a coordination on the normative, organizational, and technological layer. And this is also an addition that I might add to the opening words of Gesa Zima, because we also made the observation that the regulatory is highly underrepresented in solution concepts. They mostly focus on the organizational and also technical layer, but the regulatory compliance is also key to that, because only in the interrelationship this problem can be solved with regard to a specific context. And this is why you also basically need tailored data governance concepts to reconcile these conflicting interests with regard to specific context and specific questions. And yeah, so why is this relevant for digital twins? To give you like the broader observation, as heard in the talk earlier, they're basically a major component for managing cities, for doing evidence-based decisions and so on. However, the point that we try to make here is that they are not an end in themselves, but that the benefits is or the value is basically in the information that they bring from, that can be derived from the data they bring together for specific questions in a specific context, and not just, okay, we have a digital twin, now let's see what we can do about it. But it's always about specific questions in a specific context, and this is where potential conflicts of interest come into play, which then need to be reconciled. So given these preconceptions, we will now show how we empirically and practically addressed these multi-layer changes in order to develop practically applicable instruments for data governance, and then later on show the implications for our research. So for developing the research design, we started from the premises of the Berlin Digitalstrategie way back when, which is now Gemeinsam Digital Berlin as part of the MPSC context. This strategy was pretty innovative at the time, because it was not top-down and technology first, but rather bottom-up. It was more like a guiding principle where the municipality administration understood its own role, its own key role as shaping, guiding, and setting the framework for digital transformation, and not just throwing technology at problems. This strategy was more like a toolkit for multi-stakeholder participation to address the problems, and not to like bring already existing solution concept technology to the problem and see them fail, or see how they can make it work. Just in short, the process that the Berlin Digitalstrategie proposed was consisted of initial focus groups to define problems and goals, and like discuss outcomes and translate these results into objectives and actions, as well as defining actors, roles, and responsibilities. And we took that approach, this multi-stakeholder approach, also to our research process. So in the beginning, when we started the project back in 2022, we started with rather broad initial talks with municipality actors, where we brought up the question, firstly, what is actually the problem with data-driven urban transformation? And secondly, where is the problem? This is where we didn't have a use case yet, so these were like very early discussions. And the main point that we tackled there was, we saw that the terminologies and the concepts have to be synchronized, and this goes down to notions like data ownership and data governance in general. And yeah, so we did that. So we firstly addressed these like more conceptual, theoretical problems without a use case in mind. And therefore, we developed a heuristics of the so-called 3 data governance problems that like guided our initial research. And this was the data governance problem of explainability, which is key to, like, of course, municipal urban transformation, data access, data quality, and protection laws. And this, we took this like as a guiding principle for our initial analysis. From this process, we deducted firstly that the normative, organizational, and technical layer cannot be addressed separately, but only in their interrelationship. Because so this sounds like a distinction. We have the organizational, technological, and regulatory layer, but of course, in practice, they are highly interrelated and like go together and all the time. Secondly, we also saw that the subjective perceptions of value and risks vary depending on context. So we saw, okay, we cannot solve the problem of data governance in general from the outset, but we need to like go really into detail and see how these conflicts of interests might be reconciled with regard to a specific use case. And this is then the point where equality management came into play. So we took that use case because it's basically a pretty exemplary use case to show the various problems of transformation in general and with data, and map our understanding of the problem to that use case, and like always check back if our concept for solution works for that use case, which was highly driven by a continuous multi-stakeholder participation as well. So we took that. So we took every bit of the solution concept, brought it back, validated with stakeholders, developed it even further, and brought it back. We also did prototyping. We will show that later. We developed a dashboard, for example, and yeah. So we brought together these different pieces in a highly dynamic and sometimes dynamic is a good word for that. Dynamic and often highly unpredictable research process, let's say it like this, and checked whether it works basically and if it creates benefits, and then we were able to generalize it. As I said earlier, the concept that we developed is not limited to Berlin, nor only to the use case, but it's generalized. But we needed that whole process on the use case to be able to do that. Just to give you a very short overview on the preliminary findings of that. So again, in our research process, we saw that technology is not the problem. Rather, we saw that the processes themselves must be redesigned and critically questions to address or to be able to address the interdependencies of the normative, organizational, and technological requirements. And we also saw that with regard to the data-driven transformation, we're facing, especially in municipalities, a so-called, or in general, broader smart city context, and with focus on administrations, that we're facing the so-called Tower of Babel problem. So we see across the actors involved and the disciplines involved, we see that they have different conceptions of the problem, and therefore, of course, also different solution concepts. And they have different methods and processes that somehow need to be brought together, and which is of course very challenging when also the terminologies differ, and the people simply do not understand what they're talking about from their respective point of views. And moreover, we also saw that the disciplines themselves and the actors themselves are highly unclear about their conceptions and the terminologies. So as a result, the problem is that there are no scalable instruments for data governance to reconcile these conflicts of interest. This is a finding which is also backed by the recent BMDV report on the digital twins, which identified significant challenges in the practical implementation, and this is because of that also. Yeah. So what are the implications for digital twins from these going from these preliminary findings? So the crucial point is, again, that the value and risk of data cannot be assessed per se, but only for specific use case. So you cannot do a data governance for, let's say, the digital twin, but only in regard to a specific question for a specific context that you try to address with the digital twin as a kind of tool to approach a specific topic in urban transformation. And again, the value of digital twins is in the information derived from the data they process for the specific question and context, and therefore the use of digital twins for a specific purpose, of course, needs a distinct assessment of value and risk.
So from these first preliminary findings, we were able to derive two hypotheses. The first hypothesis considers organizational aspects, and I already saw the 3 minutes sign, so I will go through these really quickly. With data-driven projects, the public administration needs to act as a coordinator. However, there are often uncertainties regarding legal requirements as well as financial challenges, which makes this coordination very complicated, especially when they aim to work together with the private sector. Additionally, we concluded from the nature of this issue that the majority of these processes for data-driven projects are implicit, meaning that although everyday tasks are well known to the administrative staff, the overall process and the goal they want to achieve is not apparent. This is an issue because, one, most data-driven measures require new tasks and new responsibilities, which then cannot be distributed well. And second, if the steps of a process and the expected outcomes are unknown, you cannot fully determine how the data will be put into use, and therefore it is impossible, basically, to solve the conflicting interests that occur. We propose that in order to solve these interests, processes need to be explicit and stakeholders need to participate. However, this does bring up additional coordinative challenges. We investigated this through research and workshops, which I'm just skipping through, and then we formulated a second hypothesis, which focuses more on the communicative deficiencies. And Maurice has already explained the Tower of Babel issue, but what we also mean by internal deficiencies is that most administrative staff needs to fulfill unknown tasks, I've said that, and fulfilling these unknown tasks often requires support of colleagues, of data holders, of funding directors, and of decision makers. However, we had to assume that since the process is not explicit and the goal is also not explicit often, it is very difficult to formulate the added value of what you're trying to do, and therefore very difficult to find this support within your administrative organization. And our expectations towards deficiencies with external communications come from a normative analysis, because there is a series of legal requirements applied to the work of public administrations that, among other things, require a high transparency behind the reasoning and motivation of their action. Now, if they start working more with data and digital twins and models, of course, it becomes more difficult to fulfill these transparency requirements, since research also suggests that there is a data literacy or difficulties extracting information from data within the public administration. And we also investigated this with papers, workshops. Yes, so our main findings for the requirements of data-driven urban transformation is, one, there needs to be a use case, and Maurice has already said that. The only thing I want to add is, in terms of stakeholder participation, a use case is also very important, because participants need to have a use case to express their concerns and their thoughts and their beliefs. And also, just a very much a side note, in organizational terms, it's also really hard to organize participation without a use case, because who are you going to invite and why would they come? And in order for the people to participate, they need to be able to assess the data or models or digital twins that is presented to them, and the public administration, in the role of coordinator, needs to enable them to be able to assess this. And in this, we want to highlight that especially political decision makers should be involved, because they might later on decide upon that topic that is being discussed in this public participation, and need to also gain the knowledge. To resourcefully manage all these demands on participation, the public administration should utilize formal participation, which is for participation that is legally required within a process, and complement it with informal formats that make the participation more attractive and more efficient. And last but not least, although we do say processes and goals need to be explicit, the process does need to stay agile enough to react to developments, especially from the participation and other changing things. All these results were translated into our main research result, which is a data governance guide that makes data governance practically applicable. It is a scalable instrument for data governance that people can apply to their own use case and assess how they can implement data into their process and how to engage all stakeholders and take their interests into account. Here are just some images of what we mean when we say practically applicable. It bridges the gap between theory and practice. It has a bunch of templates and methods and formats, and you can really print it out and start to work. We developed this guide with a large number of municipalities in Germany that helped us through the process. They tested the guide. And as of now, it seems to be valuable for a large number of very different smart city projects, which is really, really nice to see. And lastly, before I get to the end, why are these findings important for digital twins? Maurice already said digital twins are no means to an end in itself. They are always applied in a use case, which means that there are conflicting interests that need to be reconciled. And I think, or we believe, that digital twins especially create value when you also have external data coming in to be able to mirror all these complex aspects of a city. You might want to add data from private stakeholders, although this makes it even more complicated and therefore even more so requires a data governance that maybe goes beyond standards and technical things and really synchronizes these three layers of technical layer, normative layer, and organizational layer. And we would like to encourage you all to develop that way. Thank you.